General Winder decides to make a stand to defend Washington 10 miles from the White House. And here, on the eastern branch of the Potomac, is where the fate of Washington is going to be decided.
Winder makes his stand at Bladensburg, Maryland, just 6 miles from Washington, in what will be one of the most notorious American military embarrassments of the entire war. There, on August 24th, his hastily gathered, inexperienced defenders face off against veteran troops under Major General Robert Ross, the commander of the land-based invasion force.
Ross, in many ways, is the ideal combat commander. He's aggressive, he's brave, and he leads at the head of his troops. He doesn't expect anyone to do something he's not willing to take on himself.
On Ross's order, British troops advanced toward the first of 3 American lines. They quickly outflanked the defenders and forced them to retreat. As the British moved toward the second line, American artillery blasts the oncoming light brigade. Despite this deadly onslaught, the second line begins to break.
Most of the British soldiers under Ross are veterans of the Peninsula War. They've been up against some of the best troops in the world, the French. And they're just amazed, however, at how slight the resistance is from the Americans. They expected more from Yankee Doodle.
The third line makes a desperate last stand until the British finally overrun them. General Winder orders a retreat that turns into a panic-stricken race back to Washington. They run so fast that the Redcoats suffer heat stroke trying to keep up with them. Charles Ball, a free black and one of the defenders on that third line, recalls the last moments of what will go down in history as the Bladensburg races.
If the militia regiments could have been brought to charge the British, we should have killed or taken the whole of them in a short time. But the militia ran like sheep chased by dogs.
In just 1 hour, all resistance has been wiped off the map. Now nothing stands in the way of the British as they advance toward Washington, less than 1 day's march away. Madison realizes that the onslaught is inevitable and seeks to remove himself from harm's way.
Maybe it's something like George Bush on 9/11. He's trying to find a place where he can get a hold of the situation, find out what's happening, make sure that there's not going to be more trouble in Washington, and if there is, he wants to be somewhere else.
In the aftermath of the battle, the once flourishing capital is becoming a ghost town as government officials flee the city. Battered American troops staggering back into Washington have no information of the president's whereabouts. Within hours, the British invasion force will enter Washington. As the capital descends into chaos and with the president and members of his cabinet unaccounted for, one woman will spearhead the last defense of the seat of power before the Redcoats put it to the torch. August 24th, 1814, would go down as one of the blackest days in American history. It began with a humiliating defeat at Bladensburg, Maryland, and ended with the destruction of the nation's capital. The events of this one day would test the mettle of a young nation and provide some of the most memorable moments in America's so-called forgotten war. While the British overrun American forces and advance on Washington, just 6 miles away, one woman remains firmly entrenched in the White House, the First Lady, Dolley Madison.
Dolley Madison is my favorite character in American history. And the reason is this woman is not only courageous and heroic, risking her life to save things for posterity. This is a woman who is beloved, the most beloved woman ever to occupy the White House, admired and respected by the rich, absolutely beloved by the poor.
Dolley and James Madison make up one of the oddest couples in Washington. While the president was bookish and introverted, she was the life of the party. She loved to dip snuff, play cards, and scoop ice cream. All while modeling the labors, the British would be at the doorstep of the house she had transformed into the center of Washington society. She receives word from her husband, who's out rallying troops. Evacuate the White House. As the desperate minutes dwindle, Dolly Madison heads for a national treasure.
This is a woman who, at the risk of her life, while the British are advancing on Washington and the male guards have fled from around the White House, this lady decides to save George Washington's portrait, painted by Gilbert Stuart, for the single reason that it has to be protected and saved for future generations. Which one of us, male or female today, would risk our lives for a painting? And she did that.
I insist on waiting till the large picture of General Washington is taken, so I have ordered the frame to be broken and the painting taken out. It is done.
The First Lady is among the last to evacuate the city. She finally boards her carriage, searching for her husband. By 8 p.m., British forces, led by Major General Ross, enter Washington.
It was never expected that an army of 4,000 men could march with little or no difficulty, take and have at its mercy the capital of the United States.
In retaliation for burning the Canadian Parliament at York the previous April, British troops prepare to set fire to Washington's government buildings. Redcoats, under the command of Vice Admiral Coburn, break into the Capitol. They stage a mock legislation and vote unanimously to burn the building. One resident watches the fire from her rooftop.
No drawing room was ever as brilliantly lit as the whole city that night. As flames burst through the roof of the Capitol, there was a roll of thunder.
At about 10:30 p.m., the men move on to another key government target, the White House. In the dining room, they find the table set. Coburn orders wine poured, and in a sarcastic toast to the president, drinks to Jemmy's health. Soldiers rampage through the rooms, grabbing souvenirs, including a ceremonial sword and a pair of rhinestone buckles. Even Major General Ross pockets President Madison's love letters to Dolly. Outside the mansion, the Redcoats pitch their torches through the windows, engulfing the White House in flames.
The destruction of Washington's public buildings, these fires, the glow of which was seen 50 miles away, struck at the hearts of many Americans wherever they were.
Every American heart is bursting with shame and indignation at the catastrophe, recalls George Douglas, a militia private. Perhaps no one feels the emotions more deeply than President Madison, who watches the fires from horseback in Virginia.
There's no sign of panic. There was intense concern about making sure the government didn't fold up, and he felt, of course, a responsibility. At that stage, Madison was thinking, where would he find Dolly? Where would the rest of the government be? How could he reconvene them to show that the government could still function and still exist in an effective form?
The next morning, August 25th, the British set the Library of Congress and the Navy Yard afire as storm clouds threaten overhead.